Okay, I'm going to go on mute then so you can do your stuff, and then if you guys don't hear me talking right away, let me know that I forgot to turn off mute.
Okay. All right. So I want to welcome everyone to our webinar Wednesdays at QTS here and our ongoing series of QuikInform educational webinars. Today's session is what's new in System Center Configuration Manager, as we call it, vNext, technically the 15.11 version. My name is Neil Rosenberg. I'm the president of QTS. We're also very happy to have Wally Mead from Sierson joining us and presenting the bulk of today's content. Wally is the definition of expert when it comes to System Center Configuration Manager, having worked for many years at Microsoft in the SCCM team, and then serving as technology evangelist with Sierson for SCCM. Wally does presentations on a worldwide basis around this technology, is one of the most renowned and knowledgeable SCCM experts in the world. So we're very pleased to have him as our guest presenter today. So we've got a lot of information to convey in the next hour. A couple of ground rules and notes. We are recording today's session, so we are going to have the audience on mute, and then we'll open up at the end of the session for questions. If you are, for whatever reason, unable to hear the audio, there is a dial-in number with the access code and webinar ID shown here. And we'll also make the recording available on the QTS YouTube channel following today's event. So, moving right along, some quick background on our company as the host of today's webinar. We are a Microsoft Gold partner across a number of competencies, including data center, which is where System Center falls. We have been in business for 24 years next month, serving businesses across the eastern United States, and have won a number of worldwide, national, regional, and local partner awards for Microsoft over the last 15 plus years, including the Azure Data Center Partner of the Year for New York Metro in 2014, and New York Metro Partner of the Year for the entire district. 2 of the last 3 years they've given out the award. So very strong staff expertise and desire and willingness to convey and share information with our customers, which is part of why we do these webinars. So moving right along, I want to do a very quick introduction to System Center, and then we'll pass it to Wally to drill down into SCCM specifically. So System Center, I like to explain to folks, is to systems management what Office is to personal productivity. System Center is a collection of products that have all been bundled together from a licensing perspective, although SCCM is available standalone because of its history as part of the enterprise agreement with Microsoft. But the other piece is all bundled together from the standpoint of client licensing and server licensing as a suite. They are integrated. So, for example, inventory information from Config Manager can be pushed into Service Manager, or alerts in Operations Manager can create tickets in Service Manager. And Service Manager is another technology area that Sierson has great solutions on that we partner with them on. From the standpoint of what the technologies do, SCCM, which many mid-size and corporate enterprise organizations own through enterprise licensing with Microsoft, is the technology for endpoint management, primarily desktops, laptops, but also through Intune mobile device management, and potentially for servers if you're licensed that way. And that's the full life cycle from imaging to patch management and software distribution, through remote control and service and support, and inventory for planning the next upgrade cycle. Operations Manager is a technology that we typically see as server-focused, and Operations Manager is used typically for monitoring of servers, but also can be for desktops, laptops. It is what I like to refer to as a proactive reactive tool, in that it is a tool that allows you to proactively identify issues and solve them before they cause downtime or outages that your users can see, but is also a really good reactive tool in terms of allowing you to take action faster when a problem does occur through the intelligence and knowledge bases that are built into the application management packs. The other pieces are Data Protection Manager, which is backup, Virtual Machine Manager, which is virtualization management. VMM is to Hyper-V what vCenter is in the VMware world, but it can also manage vCenter environments for migration and coexistence. System Center Orchestrator was technology Microsoft acquired when they bought Opalis. That's data center automation. Think of Visio, but instead of dragging and dropping shapes, you're dragging and dropping actions into workflows to create runbooks and automated processes. And lastly, System Center Service Manager, which is a SharePoint SQL-based portal that is used for a combination of change management from a process and communication perspective, and incident management, help desk ticketing, so competes with ServiceNow and Trackit and other tools like that. The platform in that regard is not quite as robust from a feature perspective as those, which is where the Syrson solution, the Syrson software technology solution, comes into play to extend Service Manager, make it more user-friendly, give it more functionality, bells and whistles, and really give a very cost-effective competitor to tools like ServiceNow, but giving you the ability to take advantage of the integrations across the whole System Center stack. So System Center as a family provides integration, it provides bundled pricing, and has a commonality of interface and capability that makes it easier for IT organizations to digest the technologies. In that regard, I think it's a perfect fit for mid-market organizations in particular. So there is a new release of System Center coming out. SCCM was revved in the late fall. That's why it's the 15.11, the November 2015 version. The rest of System Center, being more server focused, is in sync with Windows Server 2016, which is tracking for a Q3-ish 2016 release time window. And we'll have a separate webinar as we get closer to release date on new features and capabilities, both in System Center 2016 and Windows Server 2016. So as I mentioned, a lot of organizations own System Center Config Manager as a result of owning the enterprise agreement, the ECAL or the ECAL suite, as well as a enterprise cloud subscription or ECS. That's a cloud-enabled version of the enterprise agreement. And it has a very broad level of capabilities, especially when you start adding on components. Like we've had great success with adding third-party patch management from Secunia, or adding Microsoft's BitLocker administration module to be able to centrally manage encryption of hard disks, or being able to integrate with Citrix XenApp, XenDesktop environments through connectors that are made available for Citrix integration with SCCM. So it really can become that single pane of glass for managing the life cycle of endpoint computing systems. And that's a discussion that if you'd benefit from that and you're not using SCCM, we'd love to have with you, and we'll talk about that in the calls to action at the end of today's presentation. So without further ado, we'll switch over to talking about what's new in SCCM 15.11, and I will turn over the screen and keyboard to the one and only Wally Mead.
All right, thank you very much, Neil. That was a fantastic introduction to the System Center suite and Configuration Manager. So great for that, and I'm not sure if I warrant all those accolades on myself, but hey, we'll go with it. Okay, so you should be seeing my screen now.
Yes, we are.
Okay, very good. just wanted to make sure that we were good with that. So I did a webinar for Cyrus once, and I was like 7 minutes into it, and then finally somebody popped on, "We can't hear you, Wally." I was muted, and the screen wasn't sharing. Anyway, good. So first off, as Neil mentioned, the new release of Configuration Manager came out in what became available to the public in December of this past year. So even though it's from November, that's the 1511, as he mentioned. I want to take just a second to talk about the name. So the name of the product is just Configuration Manager now, System Center Configuration Manager. Oftentimes you're seeing people put the 1511 on it, or more appropriately, you're seeing people refer to it as current branch. If you're familiar with Windows 10 and the new Windows 10 servicing model with current branch and current branch for business and so on, and the long-term servicing branch, Configuration Manager, the new version, or as Neil's title slide said, vNext, that was a code name for it before it came released a year ago, is a current branch product. So there's no version associated with it like ConfigMan 2012. So it is just Configuration Manager. You'll see people refer to it as current branch, and then 1511 is the current version of that current branch product. So, and that's what I'm going to show you today. So the first few sets of slides here we have are going to be about some of the improvements in the product from which you guys probably already have today, which is the Configuration Manager 2012 and maybe 2012 R2 and even SP1 version. And then I got a few slides in here on some of the new features added to the product. So first area is Windows 10. The biggest reason that Configuration Manager came out in the time frame that it did was to support Windows 10. Like Neil mentioned, the rest of the System Center is coming out around the Windows Server 2016 timeframe because they're data center focused. Well, Configuration Manager is client focused, so when Windows 10 became available, needed a deployment technology for it, and that's Configuration Manager. So we'll talk about Windows 10 support first. And as you would expect with Configuration Manager, you have full client capabilities. What that means is anything you could do with a normal Windows XP, I know out of support, Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 8.1 client as far as hardware inventory, software inventory, patching, software distribution, OS deployments, compliance settings, client health, and so on. All those features are all there for Windows 10. It does have the use of Windows Defender instead of endpoint protection. So if you're using Microsoft System Center Endpoint Protection for your anti-malware, antivirus software, in the other platforms, Windows 7 up through Windows 8.1, it actually installs another agent called the Endpoint Protection Agent. Well, for Windows 10, it will actually use the built-in Windows Defender in the operating system, just treat it as endpoint protection. So that's kind of cool. You don't have to install a new agent because there's one already there. It does have full software distribution support, so you can set an application deployment type requirement rule for Windows 10 or a program requirement for Windows 10. It supports Windows Business Store software distribution, so getting apps from the Windows Business Store, or you can do side loading of applications being from a distribution point. And then as I get later on talking about mobile device management, there's a few things I'll talk about there and specific to Windows 10. Now, operating system deployment, certainly you can do the old replacement operating system scenarios, the bare metal deployments, the break fix type stuff, all those normal operating system deployment technologies that you have. Now, in addition to this, one of the improvements in Config Manager now is the ability of utilizing Windows 10's in-place upgrade support in OSD. This is Microsoft's suggested or recommended way to upgrade from a Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 8.1 platform up to Windows 10, and that is to use the in-place upgrade technology. You didn't have this really in ConfigMan 2012. There was some stuff you could download from Microsoft to give you some scripting to do this, but it wasn't really built in. It is now built into Configuration Manager. So in this new release, you have built-in capabilities for deploying Windows 10 in an upgrade scenario. So great capabilities there. And then one of the new features is the bottom half of the slide, so I'll talk about it really later on, or show it to you later on, and that's the Windows 10 servicing rings and servicing plans. the ability of you to utilize the Configuration Manager console to view and control your clients that are running Windows 10, the numbers of them, the builds they have, and then controlling when those clients get new builds of Windows 10. And I'll show you that a little bit later on when we talk about the improvements in the new features in the product. So mobile device management. So there's some cool things, as Neil mentioned, with Windows Intune or Microsoft Intune integration, you can start managing mobile devices. Well, one of the problems has been that Microsoft Intune is a standalone cloud-based service. So it can be updated on a very rapid basis because Microsoft owns the infrastructure because it's up in the cloud. You guys don't have any on-premise components that are related to or requiring the Intune infrastructure. Obviously, your mobile devices talk to Intune up in the cloud. But with that scenario, Microsoft can update that service as frequently as they want to, and they generally tend to do that on a monthly basis. Well, when you do that integration that Neil mentioned of integrating Microsoft Intune with Configuration Manager so that you can use this single pane of glass to manage your Windows laptops, desktops, servers, Macs, Linux, Unix, and now your mobile devices in one console. Well, the problem with that is that the hybrid, as it's called, mobile device management support, Microsoft Intune integrated with Configuration Manager, it's generally going to lag behind in features from what the cloud service, the standalone service provides, because there's infrastructure that every customer would have to update in order to stay up to date with that. So when 15.11 came out at the end of the last calendar year, at that point in time, some of the changes were to make the integrated scenario compatible or on par with the standalone service. And that included the ability of supporting Windows 10 with mobile device management. So you could use a Windows 10 laptop, desktop even, mobile device as a Intune client being managed through Microsoft Intune with the integration with the Configuration Manager. Now, since then, obviously, we're talking middle of March now, so the online service has probably been updated a few times, so there's now another gap between the integrated scenario and the release and the cloud service. But at that point in time, they were integrated and on par with each other. And you'll see updates happening to the on-premise environment Configuration Manager to get that back in par, as we'll talk about later on. Okay, operating system deployment, and I think I got some demos coming up here. So operating system deployment, a bunch of changes there to make things better for you. Driver importing. So driver import and management has been a common complaint for many, many years in the Configuration Manager space. Too hard to figure out what drivers to import, too hard to import them. My boot images get bloated, my OS images are bloated because I'm importing too many drivers, categories, and whatever else. So the product group went through a lot of painstaking effort to make things better for you. So some of these improvements you'll see in the demo are the path for your drivers where you're importing them is going to be in the top of the dialog box, not down with the driver name itself. So you don't have to scroll as far off to the right to find the actual driver. You're able to see it much easier without as much scrolling. It's also easier to filter your drivers by architecture, by name, by whether or not they're signed, any of those attributes, so it's easier for you to find the drivers that you want to do your importing into specific packages and boot images. It will warn you if you try and import drivers that don't make sense to be imported for boot images. Normally boot images, you only want to import maybe storage drivers, maybe network drivers, hopefully nothing, but sometimes you might have to. So if you try and import, let's say, an audio driver or something else, it's going to warn you saying, hey, you don't really need to import that for your boot image. So that can help reduce the size of your boot images. And then it's actually going to block you from importing drivers for the wrong architecture. So I've got an x86 driver that I've selected, and I'm telling it to import it into my x64 boot image. So a 32-bit driver doesn't fit very well in a 64-bit boot image, so as far as utilization, so it'll block you from doing that. So it makes sure you have the same architecture drivers as the architecture for your boot image itself. Now, the other cool thing is that it now notifies you when you might potentially cause some problems in your environment. And with OSD. This is called risky deployment notification. So what they're doing, they're making it harder for you to deploy an OSD task sequence to all clients, which has been something that people have done in the past. This is, it's called, again, risky deployment notification. So what task sequences are notified as being risky are those that are required. So if the purpose is required, not available, because if it's available, then end users can choose to do that on their own, but they're acknowledging the fact that, yes, I'm going to upgrade my computer to Windows 10 or whatever it is. It blocks the use of most of the built-in collections, such as all systems. So that's goodness. So because it's a required OSD task sequence, it's going to say, I'm not going to let you deploy this to the all systems collection or a couple other of the built-in collections. So you have to, for the most part, use custom collections. By default, it's going to, I say in the slide here, block, but it's going to hide custom collections with a member count greater than an admin-defined value. And by default, that admin-defined value is 100. So any collection that you build that has more than 100 members in it, it's going to block or hide that so you don't see it. You can easily turn that back on to pick those, but by default, it's going to hide those, assuming that normally you're going to do OS deployments to smaller collections of devices. It's actually also going to warn you if your target collection has server-based operating systems in it. So again, the scenario that you don't want to replace your Exchange server running Windows Server 2012 with a OSD image that is on Windows 10. Kind of defeats the purpose of Exchange then. And it also warns you of any deployments going to collections that have configuration manager site systems in it. You probably don't want to re-image your site server or your database server or your management point or distribution point. So it has nice notifications on blockings on those. Now, some additional things that have been improved in the product. This next one, WinPE Pure Cache, is kind of a new feature, so it could be sitting in that area, but this is the ability to have you utilize a branch office scenario. Let's say we have 10 computers out there with no local distribution point, and you want to upgrade all 10 of those computers to Windows 10. Well, in a traditional scenario with no distribution point, all 10 of those clients would have to go across your WAN to your data center, to your DP, to pull all that content from that distribution point across the wire. And as you know, OSD images happen to be fairly large in size, multiple gigabytes in size. And you don't want to have all 10 of those bringing those multiple gigabyte OS images across the wire. So what WinPE Pure Cache allows you to do is the first client that tries to download these images will download them from the DP across the WAN. It'll cache those images locally during WinPE phase, and then when it's booted up into the full, say, Windows 10 client now, it maintains that cache content. So your other clients, when they boot up into WinPE and say, hey, I want this OS image, they can pull it from that local peer as opposed to having to go across the WAN to your data center to the distribution point. So that saves you a lot of traffic going across your WAN link. So that's very cool. Kind of like branch cache, if you're familiar with branch cache for normal software distribution. This is specifically for OS deployments. It has support for task sequences that have multiple reboots in it, so some fixes in that, because that's been a big problem with doing software updates during task sequences, and multiple of them have reboots in them. Support for media, standalone or boot media greater than 32 gigabytes in size. SMSTS log file size consistency for troubleshooting. As you know, if you've done OSD, there's quite a number of different SMSTS logs in different locations depending on where you are in the process, and they change in size and you have to go searching for them. And generally by the time something goes wrong, what you were looking for has already been wiped out because the log file is too small. So now if you say I want SMSTS log in this location with this size, it maintains that size throughout the entire process. So when you get done, you'll have good logging there to go into product support or your own internal help desk if you need to. And then additional audit status messages so you know who's doing what, which I can show you here right now. So let's jump over to my demo environment. And there we go, full screen mode. So this is a current branch environment, and as you see, if I zoom in here, it is Configuration Manager. Let me go back to red. So it is Microsoft System Center Configuration Manager. It is build or version 15.11. So that's that was the original release of the current branch product. And as you can see, I have a few clients in here. In fact, the top one in the list is a Windows 10 client. I also have Windows 7, Windows 8.1, and 3 Windows Server 2012 R2 server clients in my environment. Okay, a couple of things there just to show you. If I go to Software Library, take my application, go to its properties, and go to Deployment Types. I only have one deployment type, Edit, and now I do a requirement on it. There's none. Let me go ahead and add a requirement real quick, and I will show you the requirement rules now for operating system. And you can see Windows 10 is in here. So now if I want to, I can designate that a specific deployment type can only run or is supported on Windows 10, or if I select other OSs and not Windows 10, then obviously it is not supported on Windows 10. And obviously you still see Windows XP and Windows Vista there, which shouldn't use XP, and we know nobody really used Vista. You have the same capabilities there for packages and programs. So if we were to go over to Package and take Remote App and go to my programs, I have one program, go to its properties, go to Requirements, and now you see Windows 10, 32, and 64-bit are platforms there. So I can select that as platform properties. Okay, that's cool. Let's go to look at some OSD stuff quickly. And then I'll talk about the Windows 10 deployment stuff in a little bit. So let me go ahead and pull in my drivers already started up. So here's a driver import dialog. And here you can see at the very top now, it was my original path to my driver. So I told it to go to this location, find my drivers, and it found all these drivers available for me. By default, it is only showing me drivers that are signed. So everything in this last column should say yes for signing. If I want to, I can select this checkbox and says only show me drivers that are storage or network class. So if I do that, then the list of drivers will drop down a little bit. I can also filter. So if I type in something like VMW for VMware, it filters out my drivers. So now if I just want to import those 3 VMware drivers, I can do that and put them in a specific boot image. So that's very nice. If I want to see just x86 drivers, I can select those, and you can see they all have x86 on it. In this case, they all happen to have x64 as well. Now, if I take x64, then I got some drivers that are only x64. So let me go ahead and select those drivers, a few of those. Let me go next. It just tells me I have packages. I'm not going to worry about packages right now. I'm going to take my x86 boot image, and when I click next, it says, oh, I got to update my distribution points, and then it gives me that warning or blocking saying, hey, you can't import these drivers because they don't match the architecture of the boot image. So I'm a 32-bit boot image, and I've got 64-bit drivers selected. So nice capabilities there to help you manage your drivers for the importing phase, so you're not getting stuff that you don't really need. So that's pretty nice capabilities right there. Now, let's go look at task sequences. So I mentioned the ability now of doing an upgrade of Windows 7 to Windows 10. So if I go to the Create Task Sequence wizard, there's this new option here, the 4th one on the list. You guys probably primarily use this option here, install an existing image package. So I go to my Windows 7 client, I capture that image, bring that in, create an OS image of it, and I deploy that OS image. That's what this one is. This 4th one on the list is the brand new one that's available now in the current branch product, and that's upgrade an operating system from upgrade package. So if you select that task sequence and run through the wizard, which I've already done for you, what that's going to do for you, it's going to pull an operating system upgrade package. So this is my Windows 10 source file. It's just the ISO basically from Windows 10 with all of its files from the media versus a captured image. In this case, Windows 10 is a captured image. But I created these 2 task sequences here. I have a bare metal install and then an upgrade. So I did the normal task sequence you guys are familiar with, and then the new one for upgrading. And I went ahead and already pulled those in. So here's the normal task sequence that you guys are familiar with. So I just walked through the wizard, answered all the questions. So it's going to capture my settings. It's going to, basic settings, it's going to capture user stuff with USMT. It's going to restart into WinPE, check to see if I'm BIOS or UEFI, apply the new operating system, apply Windows, apply my device drivers, install Configuration Manager, then do a restore of all my user stuff. So that's a normal task sequence. Some people, this is a long task sequence. Other people, it's a pretty short one with all the customizations you do. So that's one you're probably familiar with. Now here's the task sequence that got created when I did that upgrade task sequence. So now if you look at this one, it's got 3 commands: check readiness, upgrade, and then restart. Restart's pretty simple, restart the computer. Upgrade is a really long command line that's built in to do an upgrade from Windows 7, 8, 8.1 up to Windows 10 in the operating system. Check readiness, that one, with that command, it's going to automatically check to make sure that my computer has enough memory, that the processor's supported for Windows 10, and that my target computer is running a client-based operating system. So if I happen to deploy this to a server-based client, it would do this check and say, oh, wait a minute, it wants a client OS, I'm a server OS, it would bail out right away and it would never get re-imaged. So that's very, very cool. Now you could add this step to your other task sequence if you wanted to. That's just the standard thing you can add, but it's built in. So we do that, and then the one command line for upgrade, which there's not really a whole lot to see here, just doing an upgrade of your OS, and then restarting the computer. So if you now look at these 2 different task sequences, tell me which one you'd rather use and troubleshoot. That's 3 commands versus these, a couple dozen commands over here. So it's a whole lot easier doing an in-place upgrade to Windows 10 than it is to do a rip and replace type scenario that you might have been doing before, because it automatically utilizes all the, maintains your apps and settings and so on. You don't have to do all that capturing stuff from before. So that's very, very nice. Okay, now last thing I'll show you, then we'll go back to slides. Let me take this bare metal install. Let me go ahead and do a deployment of it. So I'll deploy. Now watch what happens as soon as I click the Browse button for collection. It pops up and says, this task sequence has potential to be a high-risk deployment. So because of that, it's going to filter out some collections. So I click OK. And now notice I don't have all systems. I don't have all desktop and server clients. All I have is all unknown computers, which is a built-in collection. It's there for OSD, and one collection called all Windows 7 clients. Notice that collection only has one member of it. Up here at the very top is that checkbox that says hide collections with a member count greater than a minimum value. That's 2. So I have set this to 2. The default is 100. Let me clear that checkbox and notice that I'll get a couple more collections available to me, and both those collections have 3 members, so obviously greater than my minimum of 2. So that will let me as an admin designate by default the maximum collection size I want to do any OS deployments to. So let me go and take my top collection, and let me go ahead and make this a required task sequence, because that's what makes it risky. And now we get this new message box pops up and says, remember before it said this had the potential to be high risk? It is now a high risk deployment because it contains more than 2 resources, so I declare that checkbox. It has server-based clients in it, which I may not want to deploy Windows 10 to a server-based OS. Again, that check readiness would filter them out or not run on it. And it has site systems in it. So it has my site server, my distribution point, my management point, and so on in it. So it's telling me that this is a high-risk deployment. And I probably don't want to continue on with this process. Now, if I think I do want to continue on with this process, I have this checkbox down at the bottom. So I would have to select the checkbox, and when I do, it's going to create audit status messages to state that Wally is the person that did this task sequence deployment. So we'll know if something does go wrong, who it was. So that's kind of the audit status message stuff that we talked about. Okay, so that's pretty cool stuff to help you save yourselves from, as they call it, shooting yourself in the foot with operating system deployment. So some cool updates there in that technology. Okay, so back into our slides. So let's go ahead and look at some of the new features in the current branch version of Configuration Manager. And this specifically is going to be 15.11.
And Wally, if I can just jump in and make one quick point from a QTS perspective. What we're recommending to our customers, because we agree absolutely that that new deployment scenario, the over-the-top approach, is a really good one if the existing environment is consistent and stable. But if the existing machines are inconsistent and haven't been deployed from a good standardized image, then we still recommend a clean re-imaging, because the biggest value in imaging from our perspective is getting that consistency that maximizes the user experience and drives down support costs. So this is something we try to understand with our clients in terms of the existing footprint and help them pick the right methodology.
Yep, consistency is a paramount thing to being able to successfully manage your environment. When you got differences here and there spread all around, it makes it really hard to have an environment that you can really trust and really get maximum value out of. So great point, Neil. Thanks. Okay, let's jump into some of the new features. So Windows 10 support, and the big thing, I already kind of had it on the previous slide, so let's go right back into my demo environment, is to show you that once you do get Windows 10 deployed, now in this same node, software library, there's this new area here, this workspace with the new node Windows 10 servicing. And when you click this, this is very cool. So this is that let me see what I got stance on Windows 10. So first off, you have Windows 10 usage. So right now I only have one build of Windows 10. If I zoom in here, you can see it's Windows 10 1511. But let's say I had some LTSBs out there, maybe I had a 1507 out there. This ring would be split up into multiple different sections of this donut, would be in different sections. And as I hovered over any one of those, it would expand out a little bit and give you the numbers for LTSB 1507, 1511, and as new builds come out. So that gives me my usage in my environment. And then Windows 10 rings, what do I have available to me in release ready, business ready, and LTSB? So what's available to me? And right now I have only the one release ready. I don't have any current branch for business or LTSBs out there. I have nothing that's nearing expiration, nor nothing that's expired yet. And I'll show you where we get those numbers from. And I have no alerts created on that. Now, we also have what's called servicing plans. So servicing plans, and I have two of them created here, lets you control when you want to deploy new versions or new builds of Windows 10 out to your environment. So I have one that says I want to deploy Windows 10 CB, current branch, to production, and one CB to pilot. And if I want to look at these, I can expand this out. And just to show you, if I go to servicing plans, I have these two different servicing plans, and if I just go to the properties for here, you can see the deployment ring. This is saying I want to deploy current branch at day 0. So as soon as a new version of Windows 10 current branch comes out, I want to deploy it right away to members of my collection, all Windows 7 clients. The other one, CB to pilot, I have a different collection I'm going to, all workstations, and I'm saying I want current branch plus 30 days. So I'm saying 30 days after the release of the next current branch release, then go out to this collection. So I create different servicing plans to automatically upgrade clients in the designated collections to the current branch or current branch for business releases as they come out. Now under all Windows 10 updates or upgrades, here's where I have all the different updates that have been made available for Windows 10 and control that. Now the last thing we had in there was on this screen, this information for expired and expiring soon. If you look down at the bottom of this dialog, you have kind of a life cycle of Windows 10. So if I zoom in here, you can see that green is release ready, current branch, blue is current branch for business, and then red is, hey, I'm nearing end of life. So here you can see I got Windows 10, 1511, my current branch is available, it's got life, and it just goes on. If I had any 1507s, which I don't have, but if I had any 1507s, you can see that as of right now, they're nearing end of life. So it's March 2016, so we're in the nearing end of life phase. You've got 1 year's life of Windows 10. So in July, that would be expired. And then I don't have any LTSBs here, but they obviously are perpetually, like 10 years or whatever for support for those. But it kind of gives you a life cycle of these, and this is the kind of the information that's used to build this chart at the top with your the percentages for expired or to generate alerts. This metadata down at the bottom will get updated as the months go by and different builds of Windows 10 come out and they start nearing their end of life scenarios. So again, it's just telling you green is good, you got life to go. Red is not good, you're nearing the end of life on it, whether you're, again, release ready or business ready on your different builds. So that's very, very cool that you can go ahead and monitor this stuff inside Configuration Manager, as well as then do the rip and replace, bare metal type deployments for Windows 10 or the in-place upgrades, whatever you need to do for your consistency's sake. So that's one really cool feature that you don't have in the other releases of Configuration Manager, as well as the in-place upgrade support natively in the product. Okay, so now a feature that I'm really excited about in the current branch product, and that's the new updates and servicing feature. So if you're familiar with Windows 10 and how Windows 10 is being updated with current branch for business, and then the non-updated one, the LTSB, and new releases coming out for those, Configuration Manager is now kind of going to that same model. So the updates and servicing feature is designed to help you keep Configuration Manager up to date. Cumulative updates and service packs that you know today from Configuration Manager 2012, they're kind of a pain. You got to go out there and find where they are, find out about them, find them, download them, and try and get them installed. And it's a pain. So you got to follow blogs or follow Twitter or follow some news group or whatever. Look at the forums to find out when things happen. So with this new updates and servicing feature, what's really cool about it, and I'll show you this in just a second, new updates will be identified automatically by Configuration Manager. They'll be downloaded automatically by Configuration Manager. They'll stage or get extracted out into your environment automatically by Configuration Manager. And then they'll just pop up in the console. You'll be told that, hey, there's a new version available. You decide whether you want to install it or not. If you do, you right-click and say Install Update Pack and walk through Wizard, and bingo, you're all done. Very, very simple, easy way to do this work of keeping Config Manager up to date. Now, the product group, Microsoft, has just released the very first update for current branch for Configuration Manager, and that came out technically on Friday of last week. So it's one of those phased releases. Not everybody has it at the same time. So that's the first one, and they plan on releasing them every 3 to 4 months. So figured 3 to 4 of those a year coming out. And there's great in-console monitoring to help you track these updates. What you've started, what you've skipped, and what the process is of that installation. As I mentioned, they're going to replace cumulative updates as well as service packs. Now, as part of that feature, there's this new feature called client piloting. So this feature goes along with that updates and servicing feature. So a new build of Configuration Manager comes out, like 1602 is available now. With 1602, there's a new client, a new Configuration Manager client. So if you want to test that new version of client out in production without upgrading everybody, it's been a little bit of a pain that you had to go through in the past. You had to create a package and program and deploy to a special collection and monitor it and so on. Now, as you're installing this new build, you just say, yeah, I want to pilot test this new client, and you designate a collection. Config Manager does all the work for you. And it will go ahead and upgrade all those clients to this new build of Configuration Manager, 1602 in this case, and will let you know when it's all done. When you think it's all good to go, it's very easy for you to, as my slide says, promote that pre-production or piloting build to the full production build for everybody else. And then you could use the auto client upgrade or software distribution or a group policy or whatever method you want to utilize to upgrade everybody. And that also has in-console monitoring to track your deployments as well. So let me show you that quickly. So if we go back to, there's my mouse, full screen mode. Let's go to administration workspace. And if we go to Cloud Services, and then Updates and Servicing, you can see that I've got 1602 that I downloaded just yesterday, in fact. It became available a week ago. Actually, it became available on the 11th, but they built it on the 9th. And if I want to, I can click on the Features tab down at the very bottom, and it shows me there's some new features coming in this, some new capabilities coming in this new version of Configuration Manager, which I'll show you in just a second. But I decided I want to go ahead and install this. So I can just right-click, Install Update Pack. It tells me that this is going to update my site servers, my consoles, my clients. It's got fixes in it, as well as new features, those 4 things we just saw. So I go ahead and click Next. It shows me those 4 new features again. If I decide I don't want to, okay, I don't want Apple stuff, I can just go ahead and turn off the iOS stuff. And that will still install that code, just not enable it in my environment. And now it asks me, do I want to upgrade or update my client bits automatically without testing, or do I want to test in that pre-production client collection? So let me go ahead and say I want to test, and I want to test on just my workstations. So all workstations will get that new client version. I would have a new license terms, and then bingo, I'm ready to roll. So I just walk through that wizard, I click Next and Close, and it automatically has already downloaded the code and shows it to me here. It's just going to install my environment. Now, I'm not going to kick this off now because it's going to slow down the rest of my demos when I get to them, because it is going to deinstall my server and reinstall or upgrade the server anyway. But what it would do, if I did run through that process, it would then go to installing state here. I could go to the monitoring workspace. There's a new node here called Site Servicing Status, right there. And when I click on that, it would show me that new build that's installing. It would tell me the status of that new build. And I could track the process there. If it had new clients in there, I was doing that client piloting. Under client status, there's production client deployment. This shows me that right now, all of my clients are compliant with my production build. And my production build is the current 1511 build, which is 8325. If I had designated pre-production testing, there's a special node here where I could see it would show me what collection I was going to. It would show me what my build number is. It's 8355 in this build, and what number of clients are in the compliant phase, installing phase, unknown, and so on. So it lets me track here what my client deployment testing is. When I'm all done, I say, yeah, 8355 works great, 1602. I just go back here. I go to this up in the ribbon or right click, and I choose this action that says Client Update Options. And there's one checkbox that says make this pre-release build now production build. And now any clients I deploy through any method will get that new client build. So great capabilities to allow you to keep Configuration Manager up to date. I really like this feature. It's going to make people's life a whole lot easier in the ConfigMan infrastructure monitoring and updating phase. Okay, mobile device management. One really cool thing here that's been added is outside the the parity with the online service is the fact that now there's on-premise mobile device management. So if you want to have manage mobile devices, but you didn't want to utilize Microsoft Intune, you didn't want your mobile devices connecting to the cloud to get managed, you can now do that management on-premise. So you still need a Microsoft Intune subscription, but it's for the site, not for your mobile devices. Your mobile devices will talk to on-premise components, an enrollment point, an enrollment proxy point, that's for the enrollment stuff, and then they talk to a management point and distribution point, just like your on-premise clients do, your desktops and laptops. So they need a management point to get policies and upload data. They need a distribution point to get content. So your mobile devices would do the same thing. So currently it's only for Windows 10 devices, which includes laptops and desktops using the built-in OMA-DM agent. Microsoft will extend this out to iOS and Android. So if you want to integrate with Intune, you can manage all your mobile devices, iOS, Android, Windows. That's through the cloud service. But if you want on-prem mobile device management, that's only for Windows 10 currently. And again, that will extend out to the other platforms. They haven't announced when, but they will do that. Now you can do inventory, Hardware inventory is normal, including what apps you have installed. Settings and certificate deployment, so locking down features of things, putting on PIN requirements and so on. App deployment, so deploying software out to your mobile devices, including user-targeted MSIs, which you don't get through the online service. There's even bulk enrollment, so I can enroll mobile devices before I hand them off to my end users to keep them from having to walk through that enrollment process to be able to use that mobile device to get access to corporate data and their email. You can still do user-initiated enrollment if you wish to. So that's a very cool feature that a lot of people are excited about because they didn't want to utilize the cloud service. They can now do on-prem mobile device management. So some additional areas of interest that might be piquing your interest. Preferred management points. So one of the most common reasons that people utilize secondary sites today is so that they can have a management point out in this remote location to keep client traffic at that location. You don't have to do that anymore with the current branch product. You can now put a management point out into that remote location and then put that management point in the boundary group for that remote location, where you probably already have one created for a distribution point that's sitting out there. So put an MP on top of that same DP, and it's already in that boundary group. Just turn on preferred MPs. Very, very simple. That will then request that clients utilize management points in their boundary group. If there isn't one available, they'll go ahead and fall back to some other MP because it's more important for you to have managed clients, even if they do have to go across the WAN link until the MP comes back up online or whatever. That's a feature that a lot of people have been looking for a long period of time, and it's finally in the product. Microsoft Azure support. So the full support for clients and servers, site systems on premises as well as hosted in Microsoft Azure. So now I can have part of my infrastructure on-prem, part of my infrastructure up in Azure, all of it up in Azure, managing on-prem clients as well as Azure-based clients. So full wide open support for Azure. A combined software center and application catalog. People were very frustrated with the fact that sometimes you would load the software center thing to get some software. Sometimes you had to load application catalog. Even if you went to the application catalog, sometimes it would make you go back to the software center to see status or uninstall. Now it's a single portal that you can use for system-targeted deployments as well as user-targeted deployments. So the application catalog very seldom needs to be used anymore. And some site and hierarchy scale improvements. A hierarchy can go up to 700,000 clients, which accommodates just about everybody in the world, and a single primary site can go up to 150,000 clients, which again, the vast majority of people don't need that many clients to be managed anyway. Multiple deployments for ADRs, so automatic deployment rules are very cool. They allow you to automate some of that mundane or repetitive tasks for software deployments on a monthly basis. Well, now you can have multiple different deployments, maybe to your workstation pilot, your workstation production, your server pilot on Monday, your server pilot on Wednesday. Those servers get updated on Fridays. Can all be made from a single ADR. The ability to initiate a WSUS cleanup. So it would happen automatically. I believe it's every 7 days. You can now initiate it from the console. And official support for that stuff that you guys are doing already. Everybody in the world creates task sequences for things outside of OSD. Deploying software updates, just running some command lines. That's never been supported before. Now you have official support for task sequences that you use outside of OSD. There's TechNet documentation that lists all the different actions that are supported for task sequencing outside of OSD. Okay, a couple other things that are coming. Ability to manage Office 365 desktop and client updates. So you already have this cool software update infrastructure utilizing WSUS and Config Manager to download catalogs, scan clients against that catalog, report results back into Config Manager. You create ADRs to download patches and deploy them out using Config Man infrastructure. Well, Office 365 doesn't play in that environment. It's now going to do that to allow you to utilize the Config Man infrastructure, software update point, and so on to get the metadata and download the patches and then give them to the client to be updated. Cluster-aware patch support and SQL Server always-on availability group support. Those are not in the 15.11 release. However, when I installed 16.02 yesterday, I noticed that those are both in. So now you can go ahead and manage a collection of clients as a cluster and designate the percentage of clients that you want to have offline for rebooting at any one point in time, as well as specify a script to what's called a node drain script to shut down things or turn things off or whatever prior to the patching process, and then a node resume script on the reboot of the systems after they're been patched. And then support for SQL Server always-on availability groups, which the rest of the system centers had for a while, and ConfigMan has not had. So that's very nice. And so that's some of that innovation you're starting to see coming with different builds. So 1602, those last two are in 1602 that I saw. All right, let me do a quick little demo of that, and we'll kick it back over for Q&A to wrap up. So just a couple things to show you. If you want to turn on the preferred management points, just go to your sites node, go to your site code, go to hierarchy settings, and then there's one checkbox right here. I'll zoom in for you. Clients prefer to use management points specified in boundary groups. So just select the checkbox, and then in your boundary group, just make sure that your management point has been added. So if I go to the properties of this management or this boundary group, go to references, and now in the middle of the text that we know nobody reads, it says management points has been added in, as well as your distribution points and state migration points. So that's pretty cool. I don't have any software targeted in this demo, but if I just go here to Software Center, here's a new Software Center. So new look and feel for user-targeted software as well as system-targeted software. So a nice new interface. You can do some branding up here to make it look like it came from your company as opposed to some phishing website or whatever. And I guess the last thing I'll show you before we finish this off is if I go back over here and I pick any of my devices, I'll take my Windows 10 client, for example, and go down to the bottom. In my case, my clients are Hyper-V. But if this was an Azure-based client that I was managing, which would be like a server, it would say Azure here. So I'd be able to, it's a discovery attribute, so I'd be able to create a collection of computers that are on-premise, collection of computers that are in Azure for different settings, different software I'm deploying, and so on. So I can manage those a little bit differently as necessary. So that's just a few different things. Oh, I can show you the clusterware. Oh, I can't. I'm 1511, so I can't show you clusterware patching. But I guess I can tell you where it would be. So when you do get updated to 1602, you'd be able to do that. So just go to a custom device collection, like all servers. Right-click and go to Properties. And then right here in this big white space, in 1602, you'll see a checkbox that says, all these systems are clustered systems. Doesn't really have to have clusters on them. Just saying treat them as a cluster. And so there'll be a checkbox right here that I'd select. And then there's a button over here, settings, that you then click, and that lets you specify the percentages, your node drain and node resume scripts. So it's on your collection settings is where you would go ahead and set the clusterware patching scenarios in 1602. Okay. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Neil so he can wrap us up and get to any questions that you guys have. So go ahead and submit those in the Q&A panel, and then we can go ahead and answer those in just a minute.
All right. Thank you, Wally. What an amazing amount of information and a lot of really cool features that Microsoft has added in with 1511. And I think as the naming goes, it shows that Microsoft is moving to cloud speed in terms of updates, not only with their cloud technologies like the Enterprise Mobility Suite, Intune, and Office 365 and Azure, but their on-premise technologies as well. So it's going to be very interesting times ahead as we see the fusion and hybridization of these technologies. So in terms of wrapping up, if you can move to the next slide for calls to action, we covered a lot of material in today's session. We would be happy to set up a call or meeting with you to go over what your strategy is around device and endpoint management, what you're doing today with System Center and maybe Intune and what you should be doing. If you do have an enterprise agreement or a select agreement with Microsoft, you may have access to software assurance planning services vouchers, which we accept as payment from Microsoft for quick design planning services we render to our customers. That can include desktop, Windows 10, Office 2016, as well as private cloud, which is where the System Center server products fall, or the other areas noted on the slide. So that's essentially a way to get free design services funded by Microsoft out of their planning services vouchers. We also have quick start engagements for most if not all of the technologies that Wally spoke about today. So System Center Config Manager, we have a quick start to get you up and running in a 3, 5, or 7-day quick start. Intune, 1, 2, or 3 days. And Windows deployment with the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, again, 3, 5, 7 days, for a heavy knowledge transfer engagement that includes a lot of knowledge transfer, process integration, as well as a best practices setup. If you're interested in one of our quick starts within 30 days of today's webinar and you attended today's webinar and you're not currently a QTS client using those services, we'll offer you a 10% introductory discount to QTS on that. Lastly, we're running these events on a regular basis, so go to qtsnet.com/events for our upcoming seminars and webinars. We do our seminars throughout the Northeast U.S. as well as webinars typically every other Wednesday or so for our webinar Wednesdays. On social, we have a YouTube channel, and our recordings of our webinars and some of our seminars are posted there, so look us up on YouTube for this recording as well as other sessions like what is the Enterprise Mobility Suite and why should I care. And we also would ask you to follow us on LinkedIn, QTS Quality Technology Solutions, as well as Twitter at QTSNJ. We also are holding our annual customer conference on September 13th at the Microsoft New York office. Time very well spent for a deep immersion in Microsoft technologies and understanding the roadmap. So a lot of stuff to do. We welcome the opportunity to engage with you and show some more subject matter expertise together. And I thank you all for your time today. With that, we will open up for questions, if anyone has any.
Yeah, I see Joseph asked a question. His question is, so for Windows Azure, you can have a CAS, primary, secondary, SQL Server, and Azure talking to local and Azure clients, and the answer is yes. So you can put, in the current 2012 scenario, if you wanted to have a site up in Azure, it had to be a standalone primary site with everything on a single box and only managing Azure-based clients. Now with the current branch product, you can have a CAS up in Azure, primary on-prem, or vice versa. Hopefully people don't have CASs. That's not a good thing to do in most cases. But you can split your architecture around. You can also have a single site managing both Azure-based and on-prem clients. So yes, you're pretty much wide open now as far as support within Azure. So yeah, that's a very, very commonly requested feature. I honestly didn't think it was going to be that common because Azure, you know, in the initial days you're paying a lot for the storage and transfers and stuff, and I guess things have gotten better because people are asking for more and more stuff to be put up there, and Config Manager has accommodated. So yeah, very good question. More questions. Right now it's the only question we have in the queue.
If there are any others, speak now, or we will call it a wrap. Going once.
Oh, there's, okay. Yeah, so Joseph just responded back, thanks. Bandwidth will come into play though, correct? And certainly, because it is Azure. So you're paying for storage, you're paying for transfer rates, you know, amount of traffic. So you have to make sure you're taking into consideration what you have for your Azure consumption. So, yep.
Okay. Any others? All right. I think
no, we just got one more. Oh, yeah. So Glenn is asking you, Neil, what is the YouTube channel?
It is searchable. Glenn, I can send you a link if you're interested, but you should be able to just search for it on YouTube.
And he says the link, yes, thanks.
Okay.
Keyword. Okay, keyword. So
All right. Last chance, going once. Going twice. All right, we have a wrap. Thank you all for your time today. Have a great day, and look forward to engaging with you around SCCM 1511.